So whatever you guys have come up with, I probably am in agreement with. I mean, we do emergency, like suspend the rules for, oh, just because, well, I forgot, oh, I thought I hit send or whatever. I mean, that's not what it's for. Even things where they're honorary stuff, unless you're actually presenting at the funeral,
I brought that, yeah, we
like
talked
that,
about that.
it's not an emergency.
Yeah.
The vast majority of the time, they
When's
don't
the
even
funeral?
know that they've been honored legislatively,
Yeah.
so, I mean.
So one thing on this emergency, as I was going through the rules, that I think will help potentially, is, so it does say in our rules that, so like if I late file something, here we go, Rule 13. So it does say late file ordinances, late resolutions will still be referred to appropriate committees per Rule 7. And then at the regular meeting, the sponsor must state the emergency, and it also talks about coming before rules. What about adding that, because it's not really in committee that people suspend like there's not typically a vote on suspending the rules in that committee. So like at budget, or parks committee. I don't recall, now granted, when I became planning chair, I requested to scale back my committees. So I haven't been on as a variety as y'all have this cycle. Have y'all been in a committee that has voted on the suspension of the rules for a late filed?
No, because the like say it's budget, they're discussing the content of the bill based off of how it affects budget. I don't know that that's appropriate for them to be discussing the rule of suspension of the rules, because.
Well, they're not discussing but it would be, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, this rule, late filed rules, I mean, the late filed amendment is late filed for the committee too. Shouldn't they be voting on that in there? Maybe not the content or the emergency
So-
nature.
Historically, we've not done that. We've only had them consider the content and not the,
Whether it
whether
was
they're going
timely
to
filed.
suspend the rules for it, right? Or
Okay.
whether it was timely, and I think it does kind of go back to the idea of they're there to talk about the
Just
substance.
Because if it's a one reading thing, or if it's an amendment or something like that, the committee has to have their opinion on the content of it. So if they just say, well, we object to the late file, then they haven't really discussed the content, and if that doesn't carry over to the floor, then it's like they really haven't had committee discussion.
But is
So-
it fair that I could if I late file something on Tuesday and budget's already met, planning's already met, I mean, we'd probably object in rules, but
Yeah,
if
because
it's
you still
filed
need
afterwards.
a committee report. So if you don't have a committee report.
On amendments, you don't need a committee report on amendments, do you?
Oh, that's true.
No, you don't, you need it on the.
On the just actual?
Yeah, on the actual. So, I don't know, I mean, at that point, if like to your point, if planning and budget is already met on Monday, then I think maybe you're out of luck.
Well, it's a gray area right now. Okay, so we've burned through some time, and I'd like to have more of us here to go through like emergency criteria, and I'm gonna do some research on that. Here are some other things that have been requested that I wanna get some impressions on, and some just things that I've gone through. So if we're just going through, just starting at, do you need one of these, Mike, or do you need
That
one?
would be
Yeah.
helpful, yeah, because I didn't,
That didn't
that
go
was terrible.
John, could you, I just flopped it over. Okay, so let me run through things that have come up from other people or things that I've marked up just to get some impressions on, and then we'll have some more of these meetings. So one thing is the executive committee. It's been brought to me that we'd like to have some minimums in there, such as like a minimum quarterly meeting. Is that gonna be an issue for the council office?
I don't think so. We've been, since I've been here, this will be the second one coming up next month. And usually it's when something has arisen that we want to bring, usually when we want to bring it to the attention of the executive committee. In this instance, the new chairs were just announced and just started in October. So we've been kind of trying to, or announced started in September. We've been trying to find a time that would be good to have a meeting. So.
Gotcha. Okay, so not gonna be a burden to y'all if we put some time of requirement in there. One thing on special committees, we haven't had as many special committees lately, but I pulled this from the state legislature's committees, that there's no special committee shall be appointed when a standing committee on the subject already exists. So I'd like to play with that language for the potential of like focus committees or subcommittees. So like if public, what are we now calling public works? So if there is, because going back to previous times where we had a special committee on sidewalks, well, that was clearly under the purview of codes, and it was not coordinated with the codes committee. There was an overlap, and so there was kind of like a one hand not talking to the left hand, right hand talking to the left hand. So that's something that like to be looked at. Any strong feelings?
No, that makes sense.
Could it be claimed, though, that almost any topic would have a committee that it would fall under?
Should. So it should
So-
be more of a, either in conjunction with the committee as a subcommittee or a special committee. I think this language needs to be tweaked some more. That's just the direct language from the state.
It's like we did the special committee that I was part of on veterans, and and it met several times and had a report that came back, and some positive work has come as a result of that. And veterans technically fell under, at the time, the old personnel committee, and now falls under human services committee. So under that, you wouldn't have a special committee for that.
Right.
Because it has a place in the committee structure.
Of course, it could be a subcommittee of the overall committee. So Tanika, we already have kind of gone over what is an emergency. I'm gonna do some research on what other things and come back to the committee. If you have
Yes.
any thoughts, just send it to the staff. And then I'm hitting other things through here, and then if y'all have anything else. So, let's see here. Going back to the committee deferrals and committee reports. So currently, if a bill is heard in one committee, say it's assigned to 3 committees, it only needs 1 committee report to go forward on the floor. There has been some pushback and forth on, well, one committee didn't have a quorum, or one committee, this would be if it was deferred more than once, but the 3rd committee approved it on through. Do we feel like it's fully vetted and should move forward if not all committees it was assigned to actually discuss the bill and deliberate it?
No.
So you feel like all committees should give a report, like let me restate that. One committee should not be able to give the report and move it on the floor.
Correct, yeah, I mean, because every committee should be looking at that piece of legislation from that committee's perspective, budget perspective, planning's perspective, so it should be different conversations.
Yes.
And so if it's not fully vetted, that to me doesn't, I mean, if that's where the work is to be done on the legislation is in committee, then each of those referred to committees need to have
A
discuss.
report before it moves forward.
Right.
Tanika, I'm sorry, I don't think I said this, Rule 7 is kind of where I've made these notes. Tanika, you've been a chair of.
I had jumped to another rule.
You've been chair of several committees. How do you feel about whether a bill can move forward on the floor or whether all committees should weigh in?
I think up under David, committee assignments, like you would be on multiple committees with that same piece of legislation. So you've already heard it again. And I just give this example. So if you're in budget and you're in budget and you're on planning, and that piece of legislation comes to whichever one comes first, just say Committee A, you're able to provide some feedback on that legislation because you sit on both committees. I guess, do we wanna revisit the quorums for the committees?
No.
Okay, so that's fine.
Because otherwise, Danica, if we were budget chair and vice chair, we could pass the budget through with a recommendation of me making a motion, you seconding, and us voting.
No, but it still has to come to the floor.
Right,
So,
but it
yeah.
would get to the floor that way.
Yeah,
You don't have to have an answer on this
no,
one. I mean,
I'm trying
Yeah.
to think this through in practice, because these are our rules. So we're saying what are we saying? A piece of legislation can have 3-4 committees. Are we saying 100%? Are we saying
I think it has.
75%?
We should be seeing less committees now, right? Because of the reorg under Courtney of the committees.
I think that usually 3 committees, I feel like is a lot.
Is a
for
max.
one committee.
But there's still
It
times that we
may
have
not
2
be-
committees.
four.
It may not be the
depending on-
max, we may get to 4.
But I mean, does
3
that
is
have
kinda-
limits in terms of how many it
It
can or?
depends on the legislation.
Depends on what the legislation
Yeah.
affects.
And I think too, we have to keep in mind that legislation coming through committee, the committee is just giving a, recommendation. It's not like, on the Hill, or in Congress where the committee can stop something. The only way it stops is with indefinite deferral, but not a no vote. So, I mean, something could not be recommended in rules, 5 against and nobody for it, but it still goes to the floor.
So John, to me, that's a prime example of why we need all the committee reports in before we move on the floor.
So what happens in practice if we don't have all committee, is it an automatic deferral?
Just keep on moving. The rules say as long as a committee
Only
as long
one
as there's
has to
one.
remain. If one report, if
No, I'm
one
talking about
committee
with
comes in.
the proposal that we're discussing. In the
We're
event-
just talking concepts.
Yeah.
Nothing, so like it says,
Yeah, we don't have a proposal.
no vote will be taken on third and final reading until a committee has made a recommendation regarding the legislation. And so I think this is like this was like when we were debating healthcare benefits, it came up when we debated healthcare benefit it was last term something in personnel that it's a similar thing, we didn't make a recommendation. If y'all will think on that. I mean, I think that all committees should be seen as equal, even though they are not always seen that way. Okay, so one thing that is not necessarily a rule, but I've made a note of at Rule 12 and somewhere else that I didn't cross-reference, is the abuse of what is often called the Murphy Rule, but it's really a Murphy motion. And I feel like my little namesake has been abused, so I just made a note at 12. Full honestly, we all sometimes miss the emails to get co-sponsors, right? Dave Rosenberg would love to do away with the ability to make a Murphy motion. I think that there are times that things just slip through the cracks, right? For council members to sign on or get an email in. What has been coming up a lot lately, I think, is when bills are on consent and they're being pulled off to make the Murphy motion. So I think that obviously I'm going to say there's still validity in a motion to have everybody sign on that's voting in the affirmative. But if it is starting to pull off things from consent and taking us, into the nightlife, is that a problem?
Is that the argument against it, or is there more to?
No,
that
it's
argument?
more how do we stop it from being abused? Because it's not a real rule, it's not a real motion, I mean, it's a motion. But I
But it
think it's
also
being
can
abused.
create some issues too, like, say you wanted to honor someone that I don't necessarily want to vote against it, but I don't necessarily want my name on there, and so then someone makes the motion for everyone to sign on, and I don't want to be the jerk to go, I don't want my name on there. So you sort of put people in positions that that's not necessarily what they would want, but they don't want to be singled out as
Right.
being ugly or, so I don't like your emotion. I guess I'm with Dave.
Yikes.
How does that
Mark
work?
I hope he's
5:43.
watching. I hope he's watching.
Because I'm not sure exactly how this works when, because I know a lot of times somebody might not be in the room. So if they're not in the room, and then who's keeping up with that?
The clerk.
Or is it just who's present
Because
in the
like when you,
building that night?
like when
who's
you
been
go to the
counted as
bathroom,
present?
they
How
don't
does
mark you
Yeah,
down
they
as voting,
do,
right?
they would, like, if you leave the room, they mark you out, and then when you come back in, they mark you back in.
I can't believe they do that. I would make
I
us,
can't believe
if I
they
was
do that
clerk, I
either.
would make a speed and clock in and clock out, like.
I would,
I
yeah.
mean,
Now, there's
trackers on
three
all of
people
you.
up there, there's a reason.
Well, I mean, I've seen them counting, you know, because
Yeah.
of quorum issues.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
but-
Matthew,
But like I know I move around, like I have to move around a lot with my hips. I just can't sit through our whole meeting, and I just move around a lot because I'm a
Especially
small
at
child.
2:30 in the morning.
Yes. So like, but I guess
It's counted for me in the room, even if you're in the gallery.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess think through a way where
Just not
you
in the
know
kitchen, right?
Right,
what is
exactly.
what is the threshold there? Like what is it? I guess also this may come down to certain council members are using it more than others, and it may need to be the vice mayor addressing that with that council member. Because I do think that there are times where it is easier for, you know, like when we're honoring Mike Jameson for his service of 1,000,000 years to Metro, you know, I want to make sure everybody signs on for them, right?
almost 1,000,000.
But
Well,
it's
there again,
definitely
what if I don't want my name on that? No.
And maybe that's a maybe it's you tell the clerk you don't want on it, the kind of error on the side of everybody's on it unless you just go up there and tell them you don't want on
Well,
it.
yeah, can you do that? Can you tell them privately rather than what Councilmember Johnston was saying publicly, I don't want on that?
I don't know that you can, because at that point, you've got
That's what I
to
was
vote on it, and so
Yeah.
if the
Right.
motion has been made and nobody objects to the motion, or if
And-
it's the, I mean, it's not usually a motion, it's usually just.
But that's not an objection. That's, as she was saying, it's not an objection to what's being passed.
Yeah,
It's just,
you don't want you
don't
don't want to
want
be listed as
the name
sponsor.
on it
An
necessarily.
objection to the Murphy motion,
yeah.
that someone could object to that, and then you would have a vote on it or something, but I don't see, cause.
that
I'm
creepy?
trying to
Yeah.
get things not off, like I don't want things coming off consent
This is, yeah, like, so this
for
is,
these honorary
And the thing
resolutions.
is, like, even when it is pulled off of consent and then you have the motion on the floor, everybody, to your point, is gonna vote aye, or they're not gonna say anything, but Sean can't tell who's not saying anything, she just knows who votes no or abstains at that point, or who's not in the room. So
mean, the only way
you're
to-
either gonna be
yeah.
on the
Get
consent, or
it,
you're
just
gonna
get up and
be
walk out.
a no vote.
Maybe I need to talk to the clerk about that
I would
one.
say, I think
It
the
sounds like
question
let's
that I
find a way
have
with the
too
clerk.
is like, if, so, like, you can add your name to something until it, I think it's until it passes. I don't know what time, I don't know if it's till the end of the meeting
It's to the
or
end of the
what.
meeting.
It isn't till the end of the
Yeah.
meeting? Okay. So that's kind of the thing, is if you're allowed to kind of like play with sponsorship, I mean, everybody has the ability to remove their name from a bill that they were signed on to. So maybe there is something where, as long as you go up there by the end of the meeting, you know, you can have your name removed.
To remove your name.
To
To
remove
remove
your
your name,
name.
or I guess
Or
what,
to add your name.
or like what I'm thinking is like
Either
when
one.
the vice mayor reads what, like, these 15 items are on consent, I raise my hand for personal privilege and say, item number 7 is an honorary resolution. Clerk, please pass around a sponsorship sheet and sign it that way. So maybe that's something I need to work on. I don't want, we had this last meeting, for example, we had 5 things at least that were on consent that were pulled off because people wanted all of us to sign on, which takes me into my next thing, because I do want to be mindful and get us out of here by 6:15, 6:30, the latest. People pulling things off of consent or off of first reading, which first reading I feel like I want to start objecting to. I know that's not a real thing, but so they can say something about it. And I think if you're having a presentation like Thistle Farms, it was requested that I take Thistle Farms off. They're being presented to at the council, yet Council Lady Stiles asked me to pull it off because she wanted to speak about it. I think I ended up speaking about it because it's in my district. But like that should be pulled off.
Why couldn't she just pull it off?
I was the sponsor. So
You have to be the sponsor to pull something off consent?
No.
she could have
I'm
done it.
lost.
I know, that's why I said Joy Stiles wanted me to pull this off. So, but the moral of the issue here, kind of merging from Murphy to the fact that these things are just coming off of consent when we're having them presented later on. Is there something we can do in the rules that says if you're making a public presentation at a later council meeting, you don't pull it off consent? I don't know if that's a rule or if that needs to go into like our decorum section.
note it down and kind of look around and see
Okay.
if there's a place where.
I mean, do y'all see what I'm
just-
talking about? Is
I
that
don't know how we strayed away from back in the day. If I was sponsoring an honorarium or whatever, and I wanted the body to be part of it, I knew I was working on it. Council staff had already helped me with it. And what you would do beforehand, you would either go through council staff and ask people to join in signing it. For those that missed it, we would walk it around and get signatures. It wasn't none of this stuff that we're doing now.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is I do
That's why I
think the
think it's
interview
just
was
gotten
even
abused.
oddly a little easier when it was physical signatures for things like that. Now that we're fully electronic, I don't know what the equivalent of walking around for signatures would be, except for some kind
But
of.
that would be me doing it. That would be me asking Courtney, hey, this is explaining to Courtney what it is.
staff has done it
so
some
that-
too on
yeah,
the floor.
they
Maybe
would,
there's
yeah.
something where the memorializing resolutions or honoraries could be up at the front at where the clerk sits, and you can go up and sign your name to it, and
Yes.
then that's just a note for the clerk to put it in the system, but
Yes.
it's not
I
a.
like
Something like that.
Yep,
Signature?
that's even better.
So we're getting rid of the Murphy
Well,
motion.
you would still, I mean, I think
You
there's
could still have
there-
it, but it
because
wouldn't
it's
be
not a
abused.
rule and it's not a motion, it's just a thing. People could still do it, but I think
I
so.
think I can.
I like
I
that.
made
It's
a-
just a thing.
She
It's a
said it's
thing.
just a
It's a
thing.
thing. So I've got a
Robert's
note
rules
that I'm
of
going to work
things.
with y'all in the clerk's office to find it. Okay.
We're making the Murphy rule better again.
Yeah, right.
Careful, I have a Cricut machine. You will all have shirts at the next rules meeting. Okay, so taking us to also on consent, which is somewhere in here. Well, let me just keep going through. Sorry. Okay, so we've hit on that. Turning the page. Item 16. I know this is kind of the Russ Pulley rule, and maybe we need to ask him, council office, or Mike, if you remember. So this is about lawsuits, and it says that the director of law needs to file a statement recommending the payment of the claim. We don't have any criteria of what that statement needs to have in it. So literally the statement could just say, I recommend this claim, similar to like our zoning memo from Metro Legal says, I see no issues, right? Like it seems kind of just redundant at times, right? But so with this, I feel like does there need to be something more than a statement recommending payment of the claim? Like I guess
I don't think so.
it's rarely come
If
up.
there's any issues, that should be brought up during committee, during budget and finance.
I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Okay. All right. Taking us down to we don't have throughout here, there's a few places that were not clarified on days, simply because, Hannah, we've talked about days before.
Yeah.
So council staff, if y'all could look at where days are set and not set, for example, rule number 22. Also on rule 22, it's the actuarial study required on pension legislation. This may be something that we kick to the committee that covers personnel, but do we want to have a study of the impacts of other things than just changes to the pension plan, such as health benefits? Is something that is coming up, is this something that is concerning to the three of y'all? Obviously, we're gonna have to go over this with more people too. But, so currently we do require actuarial study, but there are other things that impact our retirees and employees that don't require some sort of study.
We get that information, it's just not a rule.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, we would get, they would do an actuarial study too.
Don't changes to health insurance benefits and those types of benefits, I think that they are required to start with the benefit board. So I don't even think it would be appropriate for legislation to be filed without it
Going through
coming
benefit
from
board?
benefit board first.
Okay.
So does that even need to be a rule?
So then, do we not
That's kinda
need
what I was
this,
wondering,
do we
yeah.
not need 22 at all?
That's kind of what I was just thinking. I've never really thought
When
about
it-
Rule 22.
Yeah, when it comes to, I haven't either. When it comes to pension, I don't know if that same, I think the same thing exists. I think it has to go to,
Can y'all check on that to see?
Yeah.
I mean, if we can
Well,
take out a
and
rule,
that's the
then.
thing too, is even if it is something, I think that it seems more appropriate for a code provision anyway. I mean, I don't know, like, that's kind of the tough thing about this, is that there's a lot of rules that kind of tell, like, outside parties what to do, and I think that's a little tough to, not everybody's checking our rules, but they probably
No,
are checking
yeah.
the code.
Can y'all review that for us then?
Yeah.
Okay, so taking us to 23. So currently, it says no action may be taken upon appointees unless we have the questionnaire by a certain date and time. And we've had some people who have been late, and we haven't like suspended a rule or we haven't done anything. We've just typically moved forward. It doesn't spell out in the rules what if that questionnaire is late. And I think that's probably where we could just, there could come a time that it's too loosey-goosey. Do you think this is something that we need to tighten up?
Yeah,
Or that we should be saying the rules need to be suspended?
I think so because,
I think the, sorry to just
Go
keep
ahead.
interjecting, but
No,
I
you're
think the
fine.
rules, well, like at the last meeting, the rules were suspended by no objection by the vice mayor. He said, I think two of the things were questionnaires were late.
But we didn't really discuss that in here, and that could have been my fault, that maybe I should have said, no, we're not going to look at these people.
Are you getting notations that they're late, that the questionnaires were late? Cause I know I usually
We
find
have-
out
we
at
have-
2 o'clock on Tuesday. that
Yeah,
the
when it
thing
comes
is
in late, we'll get it late. Yes, it does.
Okay.
But that doesn't always translate into this committee, into the rules committee. I'm just wondering if it needs to be more clear on like that they should be deferred and we then suspend the rules, cause it's not,
Do you
it just
want
says no
one of
action
us
will be
to kind of
taken.
Hype up at the meeting and let you know that the
Yeah, we can
letter is
probably,
late?
Yeah.
or like send you an email beforehand. I feel like we usually get that from.
I mean, we get it from them, but I don't think it's very clear.
I
Well,
don't
we don't get an email, but we
email.
we
When we have our discussion with
right,
Austin,
we talk
he
to
tells
Austin and
us
he tells us.
that
Yeah.
some are late.
we haven't enforced it because we've been nice.
Yeah, and well, that's
So-
what's gotten to us a lot of
Well, and
trouble.
that was gonna be my next point is, you got people showing up down
Right,
here
they
that
show
you don't
up.
wanna be like, oh, sorry, you were late and we didn't tell you, so we're deferring it, so you have to come back in 2 weeks. Like, that's, nobody wants to be rude. That should be communicated well in advance. You know when the deadline is. Somebody does, and maybe they didn't know, but it needs to be notified when they email that in to say, hey, this was late, so you're gonna have to be on another agenda, so that it's just, why, if you're late, you're late. This shouldn't even be an issue.
We can check, so, we have the new system now. Legistar is doing the boards and commissions work. I don't exactly know all the details about it, but maybe we can check with them to see if there's a way to kind of bounce that back to the person submitting the questionnaire that says, hey, you're late and you'll be moved to the next one, or at least let the mayor's office know, or whoever the appointing
Right.
official was to
Something,
know.
yeah, something there. But of course, I mean, I will say that the last two meetings, we've deferred an appointee who did not know he was supposed to be here. So this may be more of a mayor's office issue than a council rules committee. But I do think that rules needs to discuss, I mean, there should be if there are consequences for us,
Yeah, when they've been late, we've been nice and we still consider them.
Right.
And the reasons have been all over the board.
Yeah.
They say they submitted it, they didn't submit it, some email, I mean, it's just,
Okay.
so we don't have people come and we tell them no.
That's my point, is I don't want
I
that
mean,
to
I
happen.
think we may have told somebody no at some point over the last 7 years, a time or two, but not too often.
Oh.
We usually are nice.
Do y'all remember there was that one woman who was trying to find, I can't remember which board it was, but she was having trouble filing it.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, even
Yes.
for
Yeah.
3 meetings,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
kept pushing her out,
Yeah.
because we didn't actually get it, you didn't
Yeah.
get it, so.
Okay, at the bottom of 27, do y'all want us to delete that we can request all agendas by US mail?
Huh?
Wait, bottom of 27.
Yeah, bottom,
Is that
24, I don't know,
Oh,
the number
24,
24,
okay.
bottom of 24.
We mail out a bunch of, we have some council members that, no.
I was
We
like,
don't-
Hannah,
we don't mail
no,
anything,
stop.
No.
I mean, if we're,
I'm like, tell me no.
if we are
Then we get there
signing
before the
everything
meeting.
electronic, I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of
Right.
the, you know,
Yeah.
I pushed back on some of the signatures in person stuff. But if we're, I mean, I think that's, if we end up changing anything here, would council stuff like that deleted?
That's, I mean, I think that it's not even on our office, so
It's in the clerk's
it's in the
office.
clerk's office, but I don't know that they're doing it, so I think it's one of those things
Do
that's
we
like,
have, do we
either
have to
way.
have the option for, I was thinking that maybe this is tied to some, those with disabilities and so forth?
Maybe, maybe.
Oh, right.
It's
Well, and then-
anachronistic, but I don't think it hurts.
Right,
anything
I was gonna
to have it in
say,
there.
yeah.
Okay.
And I'm sure if it
I
wasn't in
just
there.
was like, I was like, I
someone
can't
would
believe we still have
probably
this in
do it
there.
anyway, if somebody wanted it, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I'm gonna start requesting.
Right, yeah, you'll get them all by mail. And you'll probably get them 2 days after the council meeting.
Well,
Yeah.
that is what was happening with like historic commission last term, is
Right.
I'd get it after the
I
meeting.
do remember that,
And it would
yeah.
be stapled wrong and things like that.
I'll send you a link to the.
Right, yeah,
Via US mail.
yeah, right, yeah, right,
Restrictions on access to council chamber and committee rooms. This is one that I'm gonna play around with just to tweak more because it refers to the chambers and legislative area, and I think we need to be a little more clear. It's something that we touched on in the lobbyist meeting that Hannah and I need to come back to. But one thing that I wanted to focus on and get some input on is members of the press shall be permitted to sit at the front of the council chamber on either side of the dais and stand or sit along the perimeter of the council chamber. There have been a few times, and the press has not abused this, but there have been some times that I have gone to ask legal staff or staff in general a question, and I don't always know who is who up there and who is overhearing what, and if there is a question to council per se, and there is press sitting that close to our like as close as we are sitting now, that feels uncomfortable.
I don't think it's appropriate for them to be in the council chamber where we are at all.
In the so
where we sit,
yes,
whatever you
so
wanna call
they,
that.
They call it here, it's not clear, but they do say legislative area. I've always called it the floor because that's what we use up there. So I guess for terms of
I've
this
always called it
discussion,
that too.
well, let's call it the floor.
Yeah.
Cause it's carpeted, it's raised
got
up.
The floor as opposed to the gallery.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think it's
should we request that one option is that they sit along the back rail, or that they sit in the common area instead of the front.
Then they're right behind me now.
Oh, yes.
Right, I mean, what's the difference between the back
I mean,
rail
like,
or
they
just
are-
sitting on the front
everything's
row?
I mean, yeah, I mean, because there are
Toy
times
Story
where,
is
like,
coming out.
for example, you know, yes, when, like, anybody who sits on the other side of, like, where Freddie, I mean, whatever Freddie's got on his laptop has clearly been videoed by Channel 5 all the time, right? So,
I just think we've got multiple cameras in there through MNN, that if they need, I mean, whoever's speaking is going to be on MNN, they can pull that footage very easily. We don't need cameras or reporters in our area for that reason, but also just the disruption of it, because they'll walk in and out.
I'm not opposed to the cameras as much, because, like, you can't live pull the feed, I don't think, like, immediately unless you were filming.
How often are they live doing?
I don't know.
That
I
doesn't
don't want to encroach upon the freedom of the press so much, but I do feel like there are times that they are encroaching upon my ability to talk to legal
Right,
counsel.
but there's a reason why we don't allow people in our area, and it's because of that. And so not only is it people in there, it's people with cameras that have the ability to capture very
Courtney,
private.
Were you not the sponsor of cameras in the public right away? No, I'm
LPR.
kidding.
But
If
we
you
also
want to come
do-
and take a picture of my license plate, you can.
So they're
My,
so they're
my
so
face,
they're
my
allowed.
laptop, no.
So they're allowed in the garage. That's what you're saying.
They can park in the garage.
How would y'all
I-
feel about designating a press section where they are not commingled with staff and privileged advice?
Well, one thing I think we don't need is we don't need a media story that says council bars the media.
Yes, exactly. I don't
We're
want to
not
bar
barring
them,
them from the room.
but I am
It's
concerned
like-
about asking for privileged
Well,
information.
I just recently went out to California and visited the council chambers there. They're called the Board of Supervisors, but they have a room set up. They don't have as many council members as we do, so they have a lot more space in there. But they have very specific tables for the media, where
Yes.
the media people can plug in, and they've got outlets and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons why some of the print media folks sit along the staff table, behind the staff table, is because they have outlets right there that they can plug into easily. So I don't know if it would be worth looking into getting, I'm just throwing this out there not to try to bar the media, but you know that little alcovey area out in the gallery, behind where
Yep.
the sergeant at arms sits?
Yes.
You know, maybe having a row or two of tables out there with outlets for them to plug into would be a good thing.
Nah, that's behind me.
Everybody's
If they
gonna have
if they
this.
ever heard me in a meeting, it's like, nah.
No, everybody's not gonna want them behind them, right? Like, but I do think there is space behind y'all's back row. There is also, but also where the sergeant at arms sits and where like Rosie tends to sit on the opposite side. There is some space where they could be sitting. I just feel like up front where we're quite often we need to have privileged conversations with our legal counsel here. That's what I'm concerned about. So throwing it out there, think on it.
Nah,
We don't have to
I'll
make a
just
decision now.
Right behind
I've been
Councilman
hot mic before, and
Well, and two, I was gonna say, also, like, I know that a concern that was brought up at the lobbyist code meeting was, just not knowing who people are.
In
And just
general,
lots of people walking on the floor, and you just don't know who they are, and, you know, they're
It's
just.
not enforced at all.
Right,
we
exactly,
require
and.
them to have like a media badge.
Well, so that's the thing, is we probably could require that, or have them printed and, you know, ask that they put
And
them
that
on
was my
or
request to the
something.
mayor's office too. It'd be great if they would start wearing name
Some
tags.
type of lanyard.
Yeah, right, mayor's office, big red ends.
Mike, you need a name badge,
Yeah, in the middle, yeah.
a ball cap.
And an armband.
Well, and the other thing is, why does the reporter have to be back there? Because they're not interviewing us while we're working. They're not, you know, the camera, if they're wanting a special shot, they can come and set up their
I'm
camera.
happy with cameras. I guess my concern is, and I want them to have reserved seating so they have access to all of our meetings because our chambers do get full sometimes. My concern is them up at
Kind
the
of
front.
intermingled with staff a lot of the time.
Is this at all being addressed with Councilmember Syracuse and his, I don't know if it's a special committee or whatever he's got going on that's looking at
rebuilding
the
this
revamping of
building
this
is
floor
not
and
going to
all that?
happen this term though, so that doesn't affect anything right now.
It's defunct.
Yeah.
I mean,
Still
if we ever get
think
to
I
that
was on
point
it now.
where
Yeah.
we could kind of reconfigure the council chambers, there has been discussion about that, then there may be some room to, you know, get the media in their own special spot in front of the bar area. But, you know, as it stands right now, we haven't been put into a capital spending plan as far as I know, and I'm looking at the person who would know.
He's sitting there like he doesn't see you. He was like this. He was like this.
Well, why is it inappropriate just to allow the cameras to be set up for however long they want to? The media can sit back where she's talking
Where the
about in the
public
little
sits.
alcove where the public sits.
Or in the,
Because
like, in the
there's
nook,
no,
yeah.
they sit there, you got the cameraman and you got the reporter for each one of these things. That's a lot of people and they're not interviewing, so there's no need
Right,
for.
there's a need for the cameraman and camera, I guess, but not for, I mean, you could set up your camera and turn,
And
so I guess
walk
the
away.
cameraman stays, the cameraman can stay. But I guess my concern again is, we don't always know who people are on the floor, and there's privileged conversations happening at the front of the room. If for some reason the chamber is overflowing that night, you know, we make
Which is when they're
space
typically there.
within the, right, so.
They're not there when
so
nobody's there.
Along the back rail would make sense, but some sort of press designated
Well,
area.
that's the thing too. I'm just thinking, like, I'm like, the sergeant of arms sits back there. I just don't know that there's even enough space in front of the, you know, the bar.
I mean,
trying
there's
to keep you
typically,
guys-
what, maybe like 4 or 5 reporters?
I mean, I think typically.
Could we reserve the first
That
row?
area is
I feel like
supposed to
you
be for,
I was gonna say,
that's
we
the
don't, we
ADA
usually don't have a
compliant
ton of
area for
people, and
wheelchair
one of them
accessible.
usually is wearing their
Yeah.
Tennessean
I don't know where this
badge,
is.
you know.
So I guess back this up to where, so the first row of the pews is typically reserved for boards and commissions. They don't always fill it up. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Can we not just designate one of the, so without having to pull in folding tables and extension cords, well, maybe we need the extension cords. I haven't checked all the outlets out there. Could we move the press to that front row? So the first pew is saved for them or something.
I think that we can investigate whether we can. I'm not saying right now that we can, but we can look at it to see what kind of access is available there.
I'm also wondering, like, what does the state do about press? Does anyone?
Press
know?
box. So in
They
the
have a- do they
Senate,
have a press
there's
box
a
up at the
press
front?
box. In the House, where's the House press
Oh,
box?
right, it's up at the front. I
Yeah.
should know.
But they, I mean, it was like you worked up there. But like their layout's totally different. You're not going up to
Right, the press
front.
box is,
Yeah.
well, yeah.
You're not
That's all-
necessarily. I'm not having like I'm not the press and Taneka the attorney and John
Yeah.
asking for a legal opinion.
Right, yeah.
So, I mean, I think this is kind of a continuation of that other. So let's just
Yeah.
let's keep rolling that around and
Okay.
things there. Okay, so taking us to order of business. One question came up about we do consent agenda. So sorry, 31. We now do consent second and third reading. Does that need to be listed out and become more of a thing, a formal thing? Y'all are saying no.
Honestly, I think that maybe if anything, resolutions can just be made into one.
I mean, that's just if we're changing anything, a housekeeping thing.
Yeah,
that's
I
interesting.
would say combine resolutions, because even in our agenda, it says consent
Right.
resolutions. It doesn't.
Yeah, and that's,
Doesn't separate
it
them.
has always said that. And I don't know why it needs to say consent resolutions, but anyway.
So you're saying we just
It's
change it
not
to
all-
resolutions and then ordinances?
Combine,
Ordinances-
leave it at that.
No, they would still have first,
resolutions,
second, and third
ordinances
reading.
on first, ordinances on second, ordinances on third.
Okay.
so combine
just-
9 and 10 to just say resolution.
Yes.
Yes.
It was more so
That makes
whether we
better
needed
sense.
to break out a consent since that was
Yeah.
broken out, but it sounds even better that we've consolidated those two. Okay, so, I did realize in reading 36 that when I made a motion to reconsider our actions, that a couple meetings ago we did that wrong, but we'll just keep on rolling. Consent agenda resolutions, that kind of takes us back to where we were, talking about the abuse of the Murphy motion. But what I'd like to touch on is this the appropriate place? And how does the rest of us feel about consent agendas not having their committee reports read on the floor? Because if it is on consent, the committee reports are all that people are voting in favor. So it is redundant for all
Yes,
of us
saving
to say.
time, thank you. Can we get rid of that? That'd be great.
You can still
That
pull
is-
things off consent.
That is
You
what
can
that
still
would
whatever.
mean, so yeah.
So
But it
every
just-
once in a while,
it cuts out my
something
speaking
slips
point.
through, or somebody's like, actually, we had a no vote on that. I mean, we're pretty good about it, but.
Well, that's-
every once
Okay,
in a
we'll do
while.
better and we can get rid of it.
Yeah, if you, if you keep that
I
track.
have it written
yeah,
out.
if
It's
you guys
basically,
promise, Yeah.
I mean, that's where I guess
I don't know.
people can also be. I mean, things should be able to go on. Well, anyway,
Didn't we discuss this before some years ago? Mike,
Do you think that
what's
there's
the
a-
reason,
there's a requirement
what was the
for
rationale why we,
why do we have extra talking parts?
The request at the time, the compromise
Well,
was
that's
the
actually-
vice mayor at the time, Vice Mayor Briley, was gonna be asked to just affirmatively state, these are on consent, which means they all unanimously passed all committees. And for whatever reason, he just didn't wanna say that part.
Okay.
I'm okay with trading my speaking part to the vice mayor to state that.
Did he have a reason for not
I
wanting to
can't
state that
remember,
part?
did he say?
I know he did, but I just can't remember
I can't
the
remember.
details. But that was the proposed compromise, and he just didn't.
This has come from council members, like second termers and first termers across the spectrum of us, to get rid of reading consent agenda for resolutions.
Yeah.
I think for ordinances on second and third reading, that could be a different discussion, but I think for resolutions, we definitely need to cut that out.
I think you could catch it, honestly, as he's reading through, or she, maybe, whatever. Whoever's the vice mayor at the time, I'm trying to speak in general. Whoever's the vice mayor at the time, when they're reading through the consent agenda, that's when y'all catch it, is because he'll read it and you'll go,
true.
oh.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
that's when you could pull that off, and then what remains on the consent agenda, which y'all were listening, everybody's on the same page, it's like, okay, so we don't have to go through that.
Staff is great about acting like little elves and stealing my report and returning it. I mean, y'all frequently come and get my committee report, and I never notice that anybody has taken it or returned it. It just comes back in black ink, so I know that it's been.
It's magic.
It's like elves.
Yes,
those
no,
are the
that's why I was like, y'all are
council
great at being
elves. Yeah.
It's okay, so that has come through, and we'd like y'all to, I mean, let's work on that, and I've got some thoughts there, so, before, ladies, y'all joined us, or I guess the rest of our legal team, Mike and Margaret, that we kind of talked on indefinite deferrals, and that there are some times that maybe the forced withdrawal is not totally appropriate. And so thinking through, is there ever a reason to maybe suspend that rule? The justification being we are inches away from a compromise legislation. Any,
But I mean, if you indefinitely
appetite to do
defer, you can put it right back on, so what's the difference?
43.
So I wanna go back to
Sorry.
41, cause I lied to y'all.
43, we're on 43, I thought, I've
Yeah,
moved on
we
to
are on
43.
43, but I wanna go back to 41 once
41?
we 41 once we go, once
I'm
we
sorry,
start.
yeah.
That's okay, but, I mean, to me, it's like an indefinite deferral because of excessive deferrals. I mean, say, okay, sorry, you're forced into an indefinite deferral, you can just turn around and refile, I mean, it's not a big deal.
I'm talking about like the forced withdrawal,
What's a forced withdrawal?
That's,
if you defer so many
The
times.
fourth deferral after an
yeah,
indefinite
so
deferral.
you get
Oh.
your indefinite deferral, you put it back on the agenda, if it gets deferred again, it is a withdrawal. It is withdrawn.
Okay, well, I think that's actually fair, because if it's indefinitely deferred, it's not like you have a certain period of time it's coming up on the next agenda. You can work around whatever it is you're needing to work around if you're close to it, and once you get it worked out, then you file it, and you should be okay. But having this incessant deferral, indefinite deferral, come back, it's just-
deferral? So if I indefinitely defer, because I think I've got, and we work out a compromise, I come back, I defer, can I indefinitely defer again?
You mean if you have not been forced into an indefinite deferral, you have just deferred?
Voluntary indefinite deferral.
I think that you can. I don't think that if you have by your own,
It would count against your deferrals.
right, it counts as a deferral.
Yeah.
But it doesn't trigger, it's not like everything that was indefinitely deferred, if you bring it back and defer it again, is withdrawn. That's not how we interpret the rule, at least.
I mean, the issue with the indefinite deferrals is, yeah, you have to wait to put it back on the agenda. I mean, you have to request specifically later to put it back on the agenda, so yeah, I think it would just count towards your deferrals.
Okay, so
So
we were
is
just
it-
talking about the forced withdrawal part.
So is it the fourth, so after the third deferral is automatically indefinitely deferred? So how do you get to a fourth one?
You've brought it back.
You brought it back?
And then you
See, and
defer
why
it
would you
again.
bring it back if you feel like you need another deferral, or if it's just like, dude, your bill is not any good, it's not gonna work. I mean, you know, like, what point do you go like,
Happens.
nice try,
Uh-huh.
move on, right?
Yeah.
There's
How
a
many
couple
times have-
council
Well, that's
members.
where, I
How
mean,
many
that's
times has
where.
that happened?
Because,
How many
I
times has
mean,
it
if
been
Courtney, if you
withdrawn?
make the motion
No,
to
but-
defer, we do not have to vote in support of it. You can make a motion to indefinitely defer, and we vote no, and then I make a motion to, kill the bill.
Right.
The voluntary withdrawal.
The voluntary withdrawal, not triggered by this rule, just somebody just withdraws their bill?
Right, triggered by this rule.
Oh,
We're
triggered
talking
by
about
this.
involuntary withdrawal.
Involuntary triggered by this rule. It's
a couple
like
this
a
year.
handful maybe each year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like probably less
So do we
than
need to
5.
mess with this rule?
Yeah.
Or?
I think we're good on this one.
Everybody's good? Okay.
think so.
Sorry, you and,
So
Forty-three.
at least that part of it.
That part of it's okay.
Yeah, so I
Even
lied,
that might be
but I didn't mean
tweaked a
to
little
lie.
bit,
I really didn't
eventually.
lie, I just changed my mind.
what do you want to talk about?
Because they
Courtney?
asked me if I was gonna bring this up in this meeting, but I thought we were just talking about what's an emergency and what's not an emergency, and apparently we're going through all of our rules, so.
Yeah, we hit on, for the first like
Yeah.
30 minutes, what's an emergency, so then we were moving on to other stuff.
Okay, while we were in there doing fiscal policy, by the way, okay, just, okay.
Do you want to go back to 41?
I do, I would.
Okay.
So I actually, it's drafted right now, sorry, it's drafted right now because we have, for substitute legislation, just substitutes, not amendments. We've always operated, to my knowledge, and it's always been explained to me when I've had legislation that had a substitute that was, brought forth and whatever. If their substitute passes, you know that they take over the bill. That's now their
Oh, yeah,
bill.
Yeah.
Okay, now, what I
If
look.
it's an unfriendly substitute, you mean?
If it's an unfriendly or even if it's a friendly substitute, it's just like, it is what it is.
Doesn't
Now, I
matter.
can say, if you did a substitute to my bill and I was cool with it, then we're cool, which is mostly what happens. But if it is something I don't like yours, and yours passes, then you have made a substantive change to that legislation, it becomes your bill. That's how we've practiced. There's actually no rule in our rules, and there's actually no rule in Robert's Rules of Orders. I've asked these two ladies, and I've asked.
Do you have a proposal?
Yes. So, and it's just to start, because
ruling
I
you out
think
of order.
because right now, we've had how we've always done it,
What do
but
you want?
I don't care.
So let me say
I
this.
just want there to be a rule.
So in the past, there wasn't a rule. That's the power of the vice mayor, the
Right.
chair. It's at the discretion of the chair
Right.
who he comes back to as it relates to
Correct.
the bill.
Correct.
So in the past, that's how it's been.
Yes.
It's been a little wonky all over the place,
Yes.
depending on what
and
it is.
so I
Yeah.
want to take that discretion away from whoever sits
you
in
have
the vice
proposed
mayor's seat.
language?
I do. The proposed language would be if it's well, I'll read it.
Okay.
Excuse me.
It's saucy. I love it when it gets saucy.
Well, because I just feel like you can make a serious difference in how our
yeah, no, we hear
process
you.
pulls.
Tell us your
okay.
proposal.
Yeah, we get it. That's the power.
It's
That's the
6:20.
power of the chair, though,
Yeah.
Courtney. I may recognize you. I may not.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna
Right,
make.
Mike?
I'm
I mean,
gonna make
that's
a rule. So I'm reading.
You may propose a rule.
If a proposed substitute resolution or ordinance is moved by a member who is not the primary sponsor of the original resolution or ordinance, and subsequently approved by the membership, the moving member shall become the primary sponsor and will also take control of the main motion. The clerk will note the moving member as the primary sponsor in the minutes and on other records where appropriate. The moving member may choose to allow the original primary sponsor to retain sponsorship by allowing the original primary sponsor to take control of the main motion after the substitute is approved. That's if it's friendly, obviously. If a proposed substitute resolution or ordinance is moved by the primary sponsor of the original resolution or ordinance and subsequently approved by the membership, primary sponsorship shall remain with the primary sponsor. This paragraph shall not apply to zoning, blah, blah, blah.
Okay, so Courtney, if you will, I assume staff has a copy of that.
Staff did it.
If staff could share that, and then we'll come back to it because it's super dense. I think, Courtney, where this happened a little bit is when, I think where this may have gotten different than in other ways, Tanika, is when, remember how we used to, like, if y'all were all signed on to my bill and then I filed a substitute, you were all taken off and now you're still on it kind of thing? Was that part of this, or is that
No.
separate?
It's
No,
different.
this is just a gray area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So if y'all will send that, and then we'll work through it, because it's a lot of stuff to work through.
Yeah, I get it.
So
Yeah,
that-
well,
yeah.
basically what she's saying, she's done the work on the substitute, and then to feel like, maybe these are feelings or not, but I'm channeling my inner Courtney.
Probably.
She's feeling like her substitute has gotten hijacked. She's,
And I guess,
yeah.
like, on one hand,
But in the past
who
too.
remains the controlling, so like, if it's an unfriendly substitute, then no, I'm not, like, if you've gutted my bill, like when Dave withdrew his bill the other night because the substitute or the amendment
The
went on that he
amendment
didn't
passed
like.
and he didn't like the amendment.
Yeah,
Right.
so he withdrew.
And that's his right. That wasn't a substantive change. That was an
Okay.
amendment. So that's a different situation. I'm talking
So you're
about
talking
a
about just
substantive
substitute.
change to the bill.
Who
to where-
determines what's substantive?
They do.
This would
Well,
be.
this is part of one of the things that could be an issue with this is that sometimes, we don't have we don't have a very good distinction between amendment and substitute. A substitute is an amendment.
Exactly. Oh my God,
And
drives me
so the
nuts.
reason why we call things substitutes is one, primarily for convenience, two, when the caption is changed. So if there is a mistake in the caption, like to the address or whatever, we file a substitute for that as opposed to an amendment. And the form is different, for convenience, it's like even if you were substituting your own bill and you just had a bunch of changes you wanted to make and they're kind of sprinkled throughout, it's easier to do it in substitute form than to have a really long amendment that
Right.
says-
We're at the state, what happens is the amendment rewrites the bill.
Yeah. It's a similar concept.
And that's why I get
But
so.
so-
But at the
The
state, they
amendment
can't change the
the amendment
caption.
makes the bill.
Well, the caption should
And the
never be.
vast majority of substitutes and amendments are friendly, I think. Probably over 80%. So you're only gonna have the situation where, but if you have a substantive change that's unfriendly, that's the only time this would come into play, really. Because if it's friendly, she's gonna say, yeah, you can keep it, or I'll say, I don't care, you can have it. I mean, we sort of work that out on its own. If it's an unfriendly substitute that has changed it significantly, at that point, whoever has written that substitute should have, because what if the primary sponsor doesn't sign on to that substitute?
So
How do you move
I think-
something
I
that
think
you
we've gotta
didn't
get this
even
language in
sign
front
on
of
to?
us. And so let's bring it up. Let's distribute it amongst the committee and talk about it the next meeting, so we can start.
And
working
I
through
don't care if we go back and say it never goes to the substitute author. It always remains with the primary sponsor. I don't care. I just want there to be a rule, because what happened to me, quite frankly, was I was called specifically and told one thing, to be prepared to make a motion, and then, they heard I was gonna make a motion they didn't like, so, it goes to the primary sponsor. I still consider this your bill,
That's
really.
the power of the chair.
I get that. That, to me, is changing our process.
It's the power
it.
of
Life's
the
not
It's-
always fair. I think,
Well, okay,
Snake and I have seen both sides of the sword over 7 years.
And I
It
get it.
sometimes benefits you, it sometimes doesn't, and that's why I will quote former state representative Henry Fincher, who said, you read the rules of Monopoly before you play the game.
And I
get it. You want to change the rules, and we can.
well, I
discuss it as
I
a
think
group.
it's worth a conversation,
Yeah.
because I think regardless of how
So I
you
think
want.
there's not enough here to discuss it. Let's keep running through because we're at 6:25.
Yep.
Right?
Sorry, if we're tweaking 41, the one that we had an interest in is if there's any interest in moving up the amendments packet distribution.
Yes. Sorry.
Yes.
Now that there's-
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I've had discussions that Margaret had just erratically over the past several months. I think that the partnership has to be, if we're moving that deadline up, everything's connected. I think the amendments request deadline has to be
Yep.
moved up to give them time. I will
That's
throw
only
this out.
fair.
Austin usually has the agenda out Wednesday morning. If you check your emails from him, it's
Yeah.
usually Wednesday morning. So could we move the amendment request deadline from noon to 9? And give them until the end of all day Friday to get whatever they've gotten requested out by close of business Friday?
Oh, we were
were the
thinking
day
the day
before.
before. To have
Sometimes-
so that we have the same amount of working hours
Yeah.
to
Okay.
work on it. So right now, we get amendment requests at 11:59 on Friday. And then we have the remainder of that day and sometimes into first thing on Monday. I've come in first thing on Monday morning to finish something up before. And,
You're not dedicated on the weekends.
I like to keep my weekends to myself.
Anna is.
Sometimes- Every once in a
No,
while, yeah, we
I
do
guess
work
the
some
while.
on some weekends.
Here's something where
Let's hear the proposal though.
So then the amendments deadline would be Thursday at noon if we're going to then be sending out the packet by Friday morning.
Because we get the agenda
Wednesday.
Wednesday,
I will-
so amendments due Thursday.
At noon.
I mean, I feel like that's
That sounds
fair.
Here is my issue that has popped up once or twice over the 7 years, is that there's a week that I am slammed and busy and I don't get to read the whole agenda, and I need an amendment for final, because we don't get the analysis until when?
Oh, Thursday. at noon.
And so I might need an amendment, and does that give us enough time between analysis, pulling the bill, doing our research and getting things
So
in?
maybe it's close of business Thursday,
Would that work?
Request.
requests. I mean, we're talking about a half a day here, so if that,
Thursday.
you know,
It's, I mean,
Can,
it's,
can we do like a dry run before we put it in the rules?
Yeah, no. What I told Mike,
It's like-
this isn't gonna be.
as it stands right now, I know that we say like, oh, well, we don't consider the weekend to be working hours. But the fact exactly,
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
you laugh, and that's because we work on things over the
Yeah.
weekend. I mean, the preference is not to, but
Yeah.
and we don't like come into the office and make ourselves
Right.
available for office hours, but the fact remains we work over the weekends.
right.
And so
Or into the evening on Friday.
and so we're talking about what was a noon deadline to give us all that time, we're now compressing into a
What
really
if the
short
agenda
period of
came
time.
out earlier?
Well, then you have to have the filing deadline moved up. I mean,
Here's what I would like for our
everything's
next
a little
meeting.
bit of a domino.
Can y'all run through, like, make us a timeline of a few different options? And let's go from there of what those different timelines could look like. I mean, my concern is we don't get the analysis of bills until second reading. And sometimes that's a game changer on whether I want to amend that bill or propose a substitute, and I don't have time if it's a huge one.
And then here's another thing too that I'm just gonna like throw this out there. So a lot of times too, we may have the amendment finished, but we don't hear back from the council member until Sunday afternoon.
Then there's that.
And so that's kind of the thing too, is where the work may be
That
completed,
does sound like
but
the council member issue.
but the council member, I mean, if you all are, I mean, you're not only compressing our time, our working time, but also our ability to turn things around, and then two, I think everybody in this room has had an amendment prepared that you said, actually, this isn't what I was looking for, I need this
Yeah.
change. And so,
Well, I did
it's not a lot of
see,
working time for us to be working things out, and it's not always just a request, and then it's prepared and we're done. A lot of times, it's a little bit more of a back and forth.
okay, so let's,
I think there needs to be a cap on certain things you file. Like, and I don't know how we got to this, but, and this is not a slight against the two of you, okay? But J.O.N. Cooper, he just didn't let council members file legislation so we could have a dialogue. Like, that wasn't, if you filed something, you were running it the full course. He didn't allow some of this willy-nilly.
amendments?
No, legislation period. I'm talking about just overall legislation, because all this
Oh.
adds to this.
Well, I mean, on one hand, I mean, I'm the elected representative of my district, and if I need to file 500 bills, I need to file 500 bills.
No. That's not what I'm
Okay,
talking about.
okay.
I'm talking about I'm filing it because I wanted to spur a conversation. You don't file legislate. That's not what. That's as a legislator, that shouldn't be a practice for us. We file legislation. We
I
let
think
it
that's
go
where
through.
our indefinite deferrals and excessive deferrals
No,
got
this
into,
is
right?
what's happened. 'Cause I got to go back to my desk. I got them written down. And then we have these people come here, and the gallery is full, and then the council member gets up to say, I'm going to do an indefinite deferral, but just wanted to do it so we could have a conversation. What?
Yeah. No, I'm
Our
with you, yeah.
emails are
Yeah.
blowing up. I
Yeah.
mean, like, just like come on. Like, I think it needs to be more vetting of the legislation. This is why the agendas be too
That
long.
may
And I'm talking-
that may be
I'm talking
another
outside of zoning,
vice
too.
mayor to a
Examples?
council member.
We didn't say it at the vice mayor. I'm
Do you
just.
have examples that you wanna
We-
send?
I gotta
off-
run
you
it
can send it
off air.
offline.
Yeah.
Send me
Let's
some offline
let's.
examples.
I think that's you're going down a valid path. I
Yeah.
think we have to be very careful there, though.
Yeah, I just had to throw that
let's-
in there.
Feel free to make a photocopy and put your list on my desk. Make sure none of mine are on there.
I don't know if that's a rule or if that's a vice. I don't know.
Well, I do. So that takes me to decorum.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
So currently we do touch on some of the major things, right? Tobacco, nicotine. I mean, do we need to say use of tobacco and electronic? I mean, we've gotten rid of smoking everywhere, right? Smoking is not allowed in this building. But I guess chewing tobacco is. So anyway, on decorum, it has been brought up from different members, not just me and sleeveless and cardigans and things like that. But the I guess dress code of council that has deteriorated this term.
So we had a special committee on decorum that I was on.
I think I was on it.
And
Was I
I-
on it? I stopped coming. I was on it too.
Well, I think
That
Councilor
was about
Allen
being mean
was,
to each other.
huh?
No,
No,
that was about being-
it covered
That's
everything.
what prompted
It covered
but yeah.
everything,
Mhm.
and I don't know why 45 has not been updated to, because what happened was we had our recommendations based off of, you know, these really in-depth discussions for, you know, a lot of time. We might need to circle back with Council Lady Allen to see
You'll
what
request
those.
a report from Council Lady Allen on that.
I'm pretty sure she, Hannah, wasn't she the chair? I'm pretty
She
sure
was
she
the
was.
chair.
Cannot remember.
She
but
was.
I'll look.
She was, and, you know, but we had, there were some.
That's why I touched on the special committees earlier, because nothing really has come from a lot of those, and that's why they kind of need to stay in our streamlined system.
Civility and decorum?
It was something like that.
Something
Okay,
like
that's
that,
right,
yeah.
that's
That
right,
sounds
that's right.
familiar.
Yes.
I think it was, yeah.
So I guess can we ask for a report from her to
Yeah, and there
for
may
our
be
next
one
meeting?
floating out there.
On election, so 48. Elections of members of council to commissions, and so this is a question probably to our three attorneys in here. So we have planning and we have traffic and parking, but so I know there's the railroad appointment, that's not really specified in here, but Greenways and Metro Action Commission. Are there other things that the council is appointed to, and why are those just designated to the chairs of those committees?
It's in the code.
It's in the
Metro
code that they that they appoint that?
Yes.
Did we update that post committee
No.
renaming?
No.
Okay, can you pull that citation and send it to me
Yeah.
when you send me the Word doc and everything? Okay. I think that hits on everything that has been brought up to me. Is there anything else that those of you that are in the room that we haven't touched on that you'd like us to consider in the next 30 days?
There's been some talk around about allowing elected officials to hold two elected positions at the same time, and is that appropriate?
Example?
Example, what's his name? Was it Jason?
House
Potts?
and council? That's state law or court, or is it in the charter, is it where?
There's a charter provision that prevents you from holding two local offices.
Oh, Courtney, actually, funny you may bring that up.
No, I'm talking
So-
specific, well, yeah, you can't, like, you mean I can't be my
I know what you're
district
talking about.
and an at-large at the same time?
Or
Is
you
that-
can't be
Or the register of
you can't be
deeds.
register of
Yeah.
deeds
Yeah, no, I get that.
So,
It's
I know
happened
what
a
you're talking
couple
about.
of times. What is his name?
Jason Potts.
It is
who you
Jason
referred to,
Potts.
and he didn't, so, at the state, there is a rule, well, they also, so the state salaries are based off of their base salary and then per diem showing up. Down here, and this has happened, I don't wanna call out, former Representative Jason Potts as the example here, but there have been various different council members who are absent for various periods of time. It could be a month, could be a year, could be most of a term. And there are various reasons for that. But so there is, and I guess
But
when
when you needed them for a vote, they were here.
and then they were gone. And I do think that there's a conversation to be had about leaving early, showing up. I mean, that's why we put the quorum on committees, is so people showed up. And I do feel like it's not fair some nights when like I'm exhausted too, but I'm still here till midnight. So when I first got elected and like I had to miss some meetings, like I let staff know well in advance if I knew in advance, and I let the vice mayor know because I thought I had to. Just, I don't know why, but I did. And Briley was like, I don't care. But so looking through the House rules, like there is, and because I think we've talked about this when we've talked about abstentions, I brought this up. So Rule 20 at the state legislature is attendance of meeting of members required. No member shall be absent from service in the House without leave first obtained. And in the case of less number than the quorum of how, blah, 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 blah. Basically, you have to have like an excused absence, like permission. You have to give a reason of why you are not here. Would that go towards, we don't have anything in our rules or anywhere that requires us to come to committees or to, you could get elected to the Metro Council and never show up to anything.
Right. I mean, I just think it's worth a conversation of, is it appropriate to hold those two offices at the same time? And I do mean a state
I think so.
office.
That's
and
up to the constituents
And
to
a
vote
lot, I
on.
mean, you know, I guess you're right.
But
to a certain extent,
but I do think we've got to put some attendance requirements in
Yeah.
somewhere.
There's some other local governments that have, other local councils that have their rules that say something similar to that, that you need to get the, you know.
Yeah, but then what's the
excused
punishment? You can't,
absence.
Well, it's
like,
excused
unelect
or
someone.
unexcused.
Right, but let's say it's, I mean, we have several council members that don't show up a lot. And so all of a sudden, we put these minimums and it's like, okay, well, Councilman Smith, you haven't shown up to the whatever, so, and then what? I mean, that's the problem, is that how do you enforce that? You
Well,
can't,
it's not enforceable, but right now, it's not enforceable because they're not required to show up.
but why would you require it if you can't enforce it?
I wonder if there's a,
Let's see what y'all can find.
we can look at some other places.
Yeah.
I wonder if, you know, failure to show up to council meetings themselves, if that means like you don't get to file legislation for a period of time or something, or failure to show up to committees. I mean, right now, the vice mayor has the ability to remove people from committees.
But if
They're
you're not
showing
showing
up
up,
anyway,
yeah.
they'd
I
be
know, I've
like,
thought through that.
"Sweet."
That's
I
a
mean, that's-
reward.
You know, that's the
I
thing,
think
it's like
that
you really have
there's-
to figure out what's, you know, is it, I mean, are you publicly
So
shamed? I don't know.
We've hit 6:30.
Can you not
I know.
pay 'em?
9, so I want to get us out of here. Other thoughts, email them to staff. Y'all get them to me, please, in whatever way we can. I think we had a good discussion. Thank y'all.